Welcome to Sterling Visionary Voices, the podcast dedicated to bringing you diverse, innovative leadership insights and actionable strategies for success. Join hosts Laura McNeil and Bob Medeiros as they explore the art and science of role model leadership through thought-provoking conversations with real professionals. Whether you're a seasoned leader or aspiring to excellence, Sterling Visionary Voices is your guide to navigating the complexities of your leadership journey.
Forbes magazine published an article in January 2024 titled, "Why Leaders Must Prioritize Data Skills." The article highlighted the fact that many business leaders do not have the data skills to harness the impact of emerging technology, such as AI, generative AI, blockchain, and the like. C-suite skills have predominantly focused on financial acumen, understanding P&L statements and annual reports, communication skills, sales expertise, relationship building, which are all very important supportive leadership skills, but they're not the direct skills required to build an effective, data-driven workforce that can weather challenges of the future. In data-driven organizations, data literacy leads to better questions, better discussions, shared understanding, organizational alignment, and improved business outcomes. This means less bias, deliberate reasoning, and better balanced choices. In a data-driven culture, decision-making is objective, and it's less prone to be based on highly subjective whims, instincts, or opinions. Back with us again today is Ken Perry, seasoned project manager, certified in Agile. He's a university professor and consultant. He's revisiting us this time to share his insights on data-driven organizations. I'd like to welcome you, Ken, again to Visionary Voices, and I'd like to start out with a question. What drives your interest in data and your interest in emphasizing the use of data for decision-making in organizations?
Well, thank you for having me, Lauren. Good afternoon to this fabulous, warm day before summer. When you and I discussed what we wanted to talk about next, we threw some subjects back and forth, and you and I both landed on this particular area of data, in that we've seen in our career some very bad decisions made, which we'll get to during our discussion. One of the things that you mentioned about me teaching school, when I've taught some of the project management classes, one of the things that I talk about is that there are three things to consider. You have data, which are the raw numbers. You have information, which are those numbers or any other pertinent information put in some sort of format, and then you make a decision. So that to me is the life cycle: data, information, decision. That said, one of the things that we had thrown back and forth is one of the quotes from Peter Drucker, is that if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. And the other thing too is one of my favorite book of sayings had Yogi Berra, and he said, if you don't know where you're going, how do you know when you get there? Same thing, obviously with a bit more humor in it, and that you just can't crunch a bunch of numbers, come up with something, and say we have to get to 40, we have to get to 10,000. What does that mean? So you have to find that sweet spot, and again, it isn't all about numbers. And we'll get into more of that as we go through this. So too much is overwhelming. Not enough is useless. Statistically valid sample. Or you just too much numbers, too much data is that you really can't start to put them in categories, what have you. So you're missing the data going to information. How can you make a decision if the numbers are not understood? So one of the things that drives you is about how to take the data that is inside an organization and decide on how you want to improve things. When I was in grad school, our business professor, we had him for 3 different courses. He was a retired Army colonel, then a very successful private sector career. But he said over and over again in that the idea is to take that number, turn it into something actionable, and then come up with that plan. And the numbers will, like you said, it has to be objective. You just can't be focused on a certain aspect of numbers, a confirmation bias. And then what is done supposed to look like? The other idea, too, is that the 7 most expensive words in business are, we've always done it that way. The one thing that I did hear when I was in grad school is that the data that an organization have is actually their most valuable asset. It's not the real estate. Unfortunately, it's not the people, it's not the thing, it is their data, it's their experience. And if you don't know what to do with it, then you're missing out. You're paying $100 for a hamburger. That's ridiculous. The idea you want to focus on improvements, to me, is paramount in that if we set a goal that makes sense for the organization, now let's look at the data, and then we can see the gaps, and they'll start to show themselves. Now, I also like to throw in some other quotes in that Mark Twain actually quoted a British Prime Minister, and he said, "Figures often beguile me," he wrote, "particularly when I'm arranging them myself." And that was the Prime Minister at the time, Benjamin Disraeli. And he said, there are three kinds of lies: lies, damn lies, and statistics. And I'm keying on the word when you said objective a minute ago. Statistics have to come up with some sort of premise, some sort of hypothesis, analyzing them and asking objective, critical thinking style questions to decide what the gaps are. Now, that's how it works. And you have been busy in your career, starting, I'm going to say, in the 90s with Malcolm Baldrige, and now you're currently extremely active in Sterling. And let me just throw this question out at you. One of the things, how do you decide when you're looking at a potential organization to visit, how do you decide that they're asking those objective questions, and how are they measuring that? What are some of the things that you look for personally?
I look for the facts. I look for things that are not opinions, things that are balanced. I look for collaboration and agreement. I look for the truth and the root cause in the solution that we're going to drive for. I also look for this one thing, Ken, and I think this is really key. It's good to draw an opinion or draw a conclusion based upon your own vantage point or your own perspective. But it's really important to get input and collaborate with the practitioners or the users or the direct receivers of the issue that you're trying to solve. Because ultimately, the perspective across the table from a number of different vantage points will help to drive to a better collaborative outcome when those various perspectives are taken into consideration.
I like what you said in the middle of that, is that you look for the truth. That to me is extremely important, as opposed to coming up with some predetermined income, or as I'll harp on a few times today, confirmation bias, and that you can spot it. If something doesn't make sense, you can spot that it might not be the truth. And I really think that's important. Why don't we just go into one of the things that you and I both agree on that sort of is a bone of contention, and that's accountability. And I know that you said that you wanted to spend some time with the voice of the employee surveys, which I think by and large, a lot of folks roll their eyes when they come around every year or a couple of times a year. We've all been subjected to them. We've all had to answer questions that we look at. How am I supposed to actually tell someone how I feel based on these A, B, C, and D questions? I'm going to say that most, if not all, organizations out there hire a third party. I actually have a friend local here that her and her husband have a business. They have a few employees, and they do this for smaller businesses. And they administer that mandatory thing, and it's allegedly anonymous. Now, you and I are both in technology. We know that it cannot be anonymous if it has to go to an email. That can be traced back to someone. So folks who are smart enough to know that this isn't fully anonymous, so they're not going to let it rip. The other thing that you and I have observed, and you can keep me honest here, is that the questions, in my opinion, are crafted not to really touch on what we all would call an elephant in the room, if there's a blatant problem, rather than points out what most employees may or may not really care about, what motivates them. I think the hot topic lately is return to the office. And, employees like this. It's better for collaboration. Who said that? How many folks said that? So that's something you'd like to know, is what really the numbers came back. The thing that I see, because I told you I have an acquaintance that actually runs these surveys for small companies, is that she's made it crystal clear that she does not get involved with the questions themselves. She is not going to guide them what they should be. She wants the client to provide them and make sure they were blessed by the legal department. And so I don't know how that's valuable when you said about getting to the truth. The other thing, too, is that if there is an issue that does present itself, that the questions do allow something. Like I remember ages ago when I was employed at the Bank of America, they were reorging teams literally every quarter. And one of the things that came out is number one on the survey. It was almost across the board. It was like 85% of all the responses came back. We are sick and tired of quarterly reorgs. It is a waste of time and effort to get to know folks, get a new boss, it just doesn't help with productivity. And right after that, there was a reorg, and there was another one after that. So why did you ask us the question?
We all take the voice of the employee survey and we fill it out in our rightful mind, and we're focused on doing good for the organization. But the voice of the employee survey is called Voice of the Employees so that the senior leaders can receive unbiased feedback. That's why it's administered by a third party, right? So that there's some form or fashion of anonymity built into the survey itself. But what happens in some of the organizations that I've worked with is that the feedback comes back, the senior leader looks at it, but then they turn it around to their directs or their directs to go ahead and pull together task forces and make improvements to address the survey. So in actuality, what you have is the people providing the feedback for senior leaders to take action. They're the ones taking the action on the feedback that they themselves have provided.
You're correct. There's no accountability there. So why did you ask the question if you're going to ignore it? Because that's generally what I've heard in my career when folks started to do this. So you and I are both on the same page there. Just a little bit of cynicism here is that it'd be interesting to know how many companies out there that have ping pong tables, ice cream, popcorn. How many times a staffer said at a Voice of the Employee survey, I want a ping pong table. I want free ice cream. The other thing that we touched upon when we were talking about putting together this podcast is the amount of money organizations spend for these surveys. Could that have been directed to something else that is not anything you needed to survey on? You just certainly ask your staff, what do you want from us? What do you need us to give you? Not in Voice of the Employee, but I think that the amount of satisfaction surveys is almost at a tipping point that is getting ridiculous. I recently had to change jobs, and the consulting firm has sent me 3 requests for a survey so I could rate them on LinkedIn. The onboarding team have sent me 4 survey requests, and I don't mind filling them out. But I'm thinking that is ridiculous. That if you got me a job, I'm happy with it. I'm getting paid at a satisfactory rate, and you're doing what you need to do. Why do I need to be surveyed? How does that help? What does that do? How does that help you and the next person? How does that help our relationship? That's really the question. And if it goes back to data itself, how does my answers, my responses, make things better for the 2 of us, or the 3 of us, if you include the company who's employing me? How does that make it better? How does data help you? And I don't know if that was the right question to ask. Any more thoughts on that accountability before we move on?
I think it's important that when organizations invest in obtaining data, that the senior leadership take the data they receive into consideration when making decisions. Otherwise, they shouldn't even ask for the data. If they're not going to be held accountable and they don't take the fact that the data has been gathered and assembled and segmented and put into some form or fashion of information for them to consume, if they themselves are not involved in consuming it, then they should stop requesting it. Otherwise, it just becomes a sympathetic or a token of empathy to say that we are gathering this, but it's not really serving the purpose that it was intended to serve.
So the perception is you spent a lot of money. This is a half hour out of my life that I won't get back. That's mandatory. And we haven't seen any action that is meaningful. I know that the last organization I was at, this was in the medical industry, and they use a vendor called Press Ganey. They're very big in that industry. every year it was the same exercise. You take the survey, it comes back by the end of the quarter. Then the team lead is supposed to put together small committees, pick one item that could be improved, present a plan to senior management, and it may or may not be implemented. So there's a lot of time spent with the vendor. There's a lot of time spent with the staff, a lot of time spent with leadership for something that may or may not be implemented, where that time could have been spent elsewhere.
Exactly. Yep.
We'll put a pin in accountability. The next thing I want to look at is another fancy word, sustainability, using that data to get there. And my favorite example is Domino Pizza. I remember one time, this was a long time ago, and when I did some research for this particular podcast, it was around 2009, is that I remember I was having a Domino Pizza, and I said to my wife, this thing tastes like cardboard with a little bit of tomato sauce on it. It's horrible. I actually didn't finish it. And pizza's my favorite food. And that was it. We didn't order any more Domino's Pizza for a long time. And then I remember seeing a big ad campaign and what have you, coupons come in the mail about try us again, we heard you, that sort of deal. I have to tell you, since 2009, the taste of their pizza is remarkably improved. And the numbers prove it. The numbers show that they listen. So when I looked at some of the business points as opposed to just what pizza tastes like, I came back with is that the CEO of Domino and other folks who work for them embraced the flaws. They realized that denial would be disastrous. By acknowledging and accepting those, and I remember reading a press release about, we're sorry, we're going to fix it. They were able to clearly see what was needed to be done and come up with a plan, i.e., we're going to invest in the product. We're caring less about stock price and more about the product. The other thing was, again, without saying, they listened to the customers. I'm thinking at that point, their biggest market would have been kids at school, because pizzas are easy. They get delivered in a few minutes, and this thing tastes like horrible. I'm going to clean things up for your podcast, okay? So what they did was an actual right survey. Is they brought people in, what's wrong with this thing? And it was very consistent. It tastes terrible. It's cardboard. It's terrible. And then what do we need to do? What does it need to taste like? And they listen. By doing that and then inviting them back to say, okay, here's one that's spicy. Here's one that's a little sweet. Which ones do you like? And I think they came back with that, and it worked. And then the feedback was that I remember reading that Domino's actually get back to these people and say, here's what we're doing, and here's a big old coupon for you. And let us know whether or not we made it, okay? And then by being that transparent, by having press releases, by having the CEO go on some national television, in interviews, people heard it. And they gave it a try, and it worked. So what they came back with is that, well, we want to continue to improve. They have a better online and mobile ordering, and their website is pretty damn robust. You know when your pizza's ready, as opposed to let's just see what's going to go on. And you know if you get it delivered, you know where it is and when it's going to be at your house. Their platform allows you to do things through a TV, even text or social media. It's hilarious. They analyzed that data. How many times did Ken and Laura order that kind of pizza? And did they order it from home? Did they order it from someplace else? Did they order it from the Keys? Wherever it is they do, that data comes back to them. And then you're going to get targeted incentives or offers or coupons, either at the national level or at the local level or where you are at the moment. That's analyzing data for a purpose. And then go back to feedback. Did you like this? Did you enjoy the taste? And then the offers, the add-on offers that we throw out there, you haven't ordered them. What can we do to make you want to do that? Asking the question of what they're trying to get to. So they did all that. And they continue to revamp the recipes for what folks are asking for. I like it. I will say this, that years ago, they went to a new mobile, and it wasn't working. So I sent a communication through the app to Domino's, and guess what? Within 24 hours, I got a response from a human being. We're sorry. You're right. It was down that night. Here is a coupon for a pizza, and if it has trouble again, here's my desk phone number. Call me. That's pretty good for a mega corporation. That's literally around the world, okay? And, of course, the customer loyalty with the points for free pizzas, what have you. But, again, Domino's did a really good job, in my opinion. Here's a corporation that's not looking at stock price, not looking at bonuses for the executives. How do we improve our product? And if we do that, the other things come along. So that's data, in my opinion, used for the sustainability, transparency, and everybody wins. It's too bad a lot of other corporations don't think like that. What do you think, Laura?
Do you happen to know how Domino's is doing in the marketplace today? How do they rank? I don't know if they're number one in pizza delivery or number two.
Well, they are because Papa John's is out there. What's the one that's been around for 100 years? Pizza Hut. But Domino's, because it is so easy and convenient, and you get that pizza still bubbling. What I did read is they got to the level that they were looking for. They had an end in mind, and they continue to either hold that number or have incremental growth, and which that's good enough for the board of directors. That's a good question, though. So the third part is data analysis. I call it as a service. And the other thing, too, is that I talked about this when we were at the intro part of this podcast, is critical thinking. You just can't simply state something that, in my opinion, is a little flat or bland. We have to increase stock price. We have to increase customer loyalty. That's nice. How are you going to do that? The idea is you have to ask the questions to get the right answer. And I call it sometimes prosecutor mode, that a prosecutor or a defense lawyer, whoever to be in court, are asking questions that they usually know the answers to, but they want that person that they're posing those questions to think about it before they answer. You use some imagination. You also have to have an end in mind, or you should know sort of where the answer should be. Then you can start looking at the data. As you mentioned before, is that it should be objective. So if I ask the question, how would I have sustainable growth that I'm 5% a year, some number like that? How do I do that? And the times that I did get my 5% or exceeded it, what do we do different? If you're going to task a team, in my opinion, you shouldn't just say, run some numbers and show me what you got. It's that I need to see what the numbers show us that gave us 5% growth, when that happened, what was going on at the time with us and the economy and the world, and get back to me. And how much time do you need? You have to do that. Now, remember I talked about data, information, decision. That's what's missing. A lot of times people miss. They just go data to decision. Well, the numbers show the answer. No, you don't. I remember when I was in grad school, when we were presenting our end of term PowerPoints from hell, that our other professors would sit in the back of the room and absolutely put us to task. What does that number mean? Where'd you get that number from? I've never seen anything like that. And they really made us uncomfortable, which was how it should have been. As I mentioned before, you don't want to have death by PowerPoint. How do you summarize that? And then you can do a deep dive. I mentioned the acquaintance of mine that has a small company. Well, her and her husband recently did a survey for us in my car club. So we asked 5 or 6 questions. And really what it came back with is that we have 15 members in our local chapter, and we sent a survey to all of them. We got 200 responses, which is pretty good. And maybe that's not statistically valid, but here's what we got is that of the 85% of the 200 that responded, they said, we want to do 2 things. We want to drive our cars more socially, and we want to drive our cars more on a track. We want to learn to drive our cars better. So that turned into a statistically valid sample, especially if most people who responded said, this is what we want to do. Now, that did not require, and I'm not kidding, they presented this to us at a board meeting, that did not require a 22-page PowerPoint. We could have gone to the end and said, of the 200, 100 and something responded literally the same thing. They want to drive their cars more on the road or on the track. Instead of 40 minutes of presentation, what could have been 3 minutes. And then with that information, then we make decisions on what events that we want to do. That's something that's missing a lot.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept, especially in this day and age of AI and generative AI. I think we're able to get to the bottom line, the conclusion, a lot faster when we rely on generative AI to take out all the noise and help us focus as humans on the actual problem at hand and the takeaway, the key component of the takeaway.
Let's just say that let's go back to the voice of the employee. Let's just say that of the people who surveyed, and there's usually some free form at the end of the question, so the majority came back and said, we do not need to have hour-long meetings every week with the senior leader. The information that is shared at that meeting, we already knew from our immediate supervisor. Now, does that senior leader take it personal, or does it, you know what, let's cancel those meetings. Go and have another hour back in your life?
Well, see, as a senior leader, I would take that information and say, okay, it's still important for me to meet with the people, but obviously I'm not giving them the information they need because they already know it. Let me do better and provide them with information that's more useful, that further aligns the organization. I would not cancel the meetings, however, because that level of engagement drives alignment for an organization, keeps people together. So obviously, it's the wrong information that's being shared if you get that feedback.
But you're right. You're more accurate in saying that, okay, I really like the fact that we can spend some time together. FaceTime, I don't care if it's virtual or not. The format isn't working. What do you want me to do? What's a good use of our time? That to me would be, you're right, that's a lot more productive. I think also we're getting at, let's just stick with those meetings for a moment, is that usually it's a one-way communication. This person is finding some bullet points to fill up some time. Any questions? Okay, no, I'm going to give you back 20 minutes of your day. But you're saying is, if that's what folks are finding not a best use of their time, what do I need to do as a leader to make it so it is a good use of their time so we can make things here more, better, faster? I think that's what you're talking about, right?
Exactly. Exactly. It's because you're having the meetings to promote engagement and alignment across the organization up and down. It should be two-way. And if it's not, or if it's not perceived as beneficial in a two-way engagement, then the benefit of that session is lost, and you need to change the content or context of the connection.
And again, that's true listening. And to me, what you came back with is something that will make folks happy. I think when you and I were talking yesterday, we talked about it. I think it might have been P.T. Barnum who said, "It's not what you said, it's not what you did, it's how you made them feel."
Right.
If you say to folks, "Okay, I hear you," not canceling the meetings because I'm the boss. However, what do we need to do to make these things more productive? What would we need to have so it's a good use of our time? And shut up and listen. I like it. Anything else as far as critical thinking you want me to touch on?
No, I think you hit it.
I'd like to have a little bit of fun before we close down, if that's okay.
Yes, absolutely. All up for fun.
I like to use current events or television shows or whatever, things that are popular to drive home an example. And there was a series on Apple TV. I think it debuted in 2023. There'll be a second season coming up, but it takes a while to produce this thing. It was called Hijack. It had Idris Elba in it as a negotiator. Started off with the military, then did the service, based in London, because I think that's where Idris is from anyway. And he was on a flight from Dubai going back to London. It didn't take long before he realized that this flight was hijacked. That's not what I'm trying to get to. This is still sticking with data. Now, the folks on the ground, the air traffic controllers, nobody knew that this flight was hijacked. Now, when you establish a series, I think there were eight episodes of this, you have to establish the character. So very quickly, I'm going to get to the one character. Alice. Her name was Alice. She was an air traffic controller. She divorced from her husband and going back and forth with childcare, late for work, freaking out, transportation. She finally makes it to Heathrow. And the boss says, "If you're late one more time, I know. And she sits down and logs on. And she sees something that most people would ignore. And this goes to the true understanding of data information decision, like I said before. She sees that this one flight that originated in Dubai is acting a little different. And then she went back, and I think I remember something like this. Now, this debuted in 2023, so it was probably shot in 2022. And she went back and noticed that the planes, the way they were transponding, or some attribute of that flight that an air traffic controller sees, was using something that was done during COVID. Like, we're in distress. And she brought her supervisor over to it, and he dismissed it. She said no, she would not back off. So what I'm getting at is that because she saw that, the rest of the episodes were able to then build upon that. And then Idris Elba was able to get a cell phone and call his wife. But what I'm really getting at is that Alice saw what was usually an ignored piece of data, compared it to some protocol that she was exposed to 2 years before during COVID, and said, "There's a problem here." And then she made people listen to her. And for the rest of the episodes, it unraveled so they would bring the flight down safely. That to me is true data analysis. Alice took something that most people would ignore, realized it was a problem, confirmed it, and got folk to listen to. And again, because it's fiction, they brought it down safely.
She was using data to actually prompt the need to further investigate.
She knew what question to ask.
Right.
The reason she said it was a problem is that this means that they cannot use the normal means of communication. Well, what do you mean? We just tried to get them on the radio. Well, they're not responding, or they are responding. I think that's what it was, is that the pilot had a gun to his head and knew he needed to follow instructions. So he wasn't saying Mayday or anything, but he said, this thing is still showing on my screen as a problem after you just spoke with the pilot. This is against protocol. And she did not back off. So she added one more thing, is that after they spoke with the pilot, that little indicator should have changed, or that the way that pilot was actually flying should have changed. I love it when fiction proves a point, and it's a little bit of fun when they do it. I want to bring it home a little bit, expand a little bit to drive some decisions. One of the things that I like harping on is that the Fortune 50 companies, which companies out there actually listen to their employees and their customers? I looked in 2005 and I looked at 2024. And Walmart was still at the top of the list of Fortune 50. I'm a regular customer of Walmart, and I've never left that store angry. I've never left that store empty-handed that I didn't go in to buy something. They take care of it. What changed after that was in 2005, right behind Walmart, were Exxon, General Motors, Ford, General Electric, and then Chevron, Texaco, Philips, Citigroup. And at the bottom of that list was IBM. What's on there now is right after Walmart is Amazon, Apple, United Healthcare, Berkshire Hathaway, CVS Health. Then we have ExxonMobil. And then Alphabet, I did not know this, I looked it up. That's the parent company of Google. So we went from automobile manufacturing and energy to healthcare, online shopping, and Google. The other thing I want to do is just close out with one more bit of what's been in the popular TV. Is Showtime had a TV show that was on for 4 or 5 years called Billions. And the main character was Bobby Axelrod, somebody who grew up in the streets in New York City or somewhere and became a self-made billionaire. One of the quotes that I just loved, I actually remembered it so much, I rewound it and wrote it down. He said, there's a small group of people who can do the math. There's even a smaller group who can explain it. Those who can do both become billionaires. That goes back to Alice. How does somebody who runs a hedge fund, corporate banking, whatever they call themselves, right? How do those people make money? They don't make decisions based on emotion. It's data. And how do they know that McNeil Industries is going to have problems? What indicators did they see that shows McNeil Industries is going to have problems in 6 months? So again, if you can do the math, great. If you can explain it, you're golden. Now, let's just touch on one thing that I think could be a jump off for another podcast, is that the next big thing is AI. 20 years ago, it was offshoring, right? So the question is that we want AI. Okay, what is that going to do for you? We need AI. It's going to reduce our costs. How? So AI is a tool. How are you going to deploy that tool? To what? And the thing about it is I explain to people and they ask me, well, Ken, what's AI? I said, well, I'm not a data scientist. But I would say to them, it is a tool. It'll do what you ask it to do. Now, I've been using that for the past year or so when I want to rewrite something or when I redid my resume. Instead of just saying, I want to rewrite my resume, I ask ChatGPT, or I want my resume to show in this paragraph, give it a paragraph, and I ask it a very specific thing to do. And it comes back with what I wanted because I asked the right question, critical thinking. So you can use AI, but you have to be critically thinking. And you, as a leader, need to ask the right question, not just, I want AI, plug it in, go get it. Because this thing it'll spill back something, but you don't know what it is. Like I sent a thank you note for an interview a while back, and I asked the tools, I want this to be a thank you note, but I want to make these key points to bring it out that came up in my interview. And it did its little thinking for almost 30 seconds, and this was only a paragraph. But I gave it some work to do, and what came back was pretty darn okay. And I changed a few words to make it sound like this is me speaking, and wait for it, I got the job. So you're using the tool. I used the raw data, my words. I gave it some specific tasks. And this is what I want done. This is what done should look like. And it did it. Don't just throw it in. Don't just give me a bunch of numbers in a PowerPoint. Know what done should look like when you start. Well, that's all I have, Laura. Is there anything else that you want to touch on before we close down?
Great points, Ken. No, thank you so much. Great job covering the topics. Always a pleasure chatting with you. Thanks again for spending some time with us today. We really appreciate it.
You too, and my pleasure as always. Have a good rest of your day and weekend. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Sterling Visionary Voices, Insights for Role Model Leadership from the Sterling Council. Discover more and connect with us at sterlingvisionaryvoices.com.